Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle.
And I'm two of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yes, and we want to thank you for joining us, whether you're here live with all of these cool people or watching on the replay on YouTube. We're happy to have you here with us as well. And of course, we need to do our YouTube spiel. So fun, where we ask you to take a moment to like this video, perhaps, and subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment and engage with us and with our lovely community here who are milling about and making such amazing contributions every time we get together, both live and just being part of the mixture, as it were, of amazing human beings that we have among us. And of course, if you'd love to support our work into perpetuity, keep us functioning, keep our heads above water, you can make a donation if you like. And as Mushtaq always says, don't donate what you can't spare. Look in the couch, find those extra quarters and whatnot that are just secreted away where you didn't realize they were. And if you feel up for it, hand those over to us because we'll make good use of them. Anything else I need to add?
Um, let's reemphasize, take a moment and like this video.
Okay.
Our last video was very popular. We got a huge number of people watching it. We got lots of people liking it. But we also got the most hates we have ever had on a video.
Which is weird.
People were upset about that particular topic. And so your likes offset their hates. And it helps us stay up in the rankings so other people who are almost as cool as you can find this channel.
And win-win-win for everybody except for our haters who make it past time to hate us. And that's fun in its own
Yeah,
way. All
yeah,
right.
we laugh.
um
We got
yeah,
told that we were satanic this week.
that hasn't happened in a
Yeah,
while. That's fun. We don't even know why. It was
yeah, they
just
were
one of
very
those things.
unclear.
Yeah. They just said satanic, right?
Yeah,
Well, we can check that on the bingo board.
yep.
All right, so
And
this
Nora has
evening,
had one marriage proposal.
can't go wrong with those. So, anyways, let's get started.
All
Tonight's
right,
topic.
tonight's topic.
Yeah, this is kind of a special one, isn't it? Because we're referencing some poetry.
Yeah, and it's not just any poetry, it's the poetry of Yunus Emre.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, it's a special poem because my teacher used to recite this in Turkish and he translated it into English for me. And I don't have the translation with me, unfortunately. It's in storage back east, but I used somebody else's translation, which is not as good, but close.
Someday we'll have our Sheikh's translation to share with you all.
Yeah. And um, we should start off by reading the poem.
Let's do that.
Okay. We entered the house of realization. We witnessed the body, the whirling skies, the many-layered earth, the 70,000 veils we found in the body. The night and the day, the planets, the words inscribed on the holy tablets, the hill that Moses climbed, the temple, and Israfel's trumpet we observed in the body. Torah, Psalms, Gospel, Quran. What these books have to say, we found in the body. Everybody says these words of Yunus are true. Truth is wherever you want it. We found it all within the body. And that you can find that in a book called The Drop That Became the Sea, lyric poems of Yunus Emre, translated by Rafik Algan and Kabir Hilemsky. And they're a fun poem. So that poem is kind of pointed, and it suggests that if you want to know the truth, being embodied isn't a bad way to start. So what does that mean, being embodied? Anybody got an idea? I mean, I can give you my definition, but you might have a better one,
Yeah, I
Cherie.
might like to take a leap.
Yeah, we're going to name drop Cherie. We're a loud talker.
Well, in Cherie's absence, I'm going to say that I can't hear Cherie, so maybe your mic's off. But I was going to say that without a body, then we don't exist at its most basic level.
Yeah, we certainly don't exist here. Yeah, as I said in the write-up, the body is your tool for being in this world. You can't be in this world without a body. And we say having a body, but it's not having a body. Your body is not an object. Your body is part of your subject. And this is tricky.
Anne Rice got off one great, undeniably great line in her writing career. Beware the word divorced from the flesh.
Yes.
Yeah, though she meant something really stupid by it, I'm sure.
Um, actually, much less stupid than usual.
I'm surprised.
So how would you elaborate a tiny bit on that, Todd?
I would say that um, the body, the body is, as you said, your connection to the universe, to the physical world. It is the thing that we have that the angels envy because it allows us to learn from the physical world and to make changes in this world that we're in, and that to consider yourself and to try to act as if you're just a brain and a spirit divorced from it is to lose an enormous chunk an enormous chunk of what we are and our ability to perceive and to interact with other people, with uh, with this world that we're given a terribly short time.
Well put, Todd. Thank you. James.
Well, in my limited experience so far, when I drop awareness into the body as a total field, when I try to do that, it's taking me out of my story. It's taking me out of my more artificial identities. At the same time, it's also exposing me to more intense emotions. Um, so the awareness of the body, the real whole, where it's not just a conceptual relationship to it, but direct awareness. Very challenging, but it makes you very real, I think.
Thank you, James.
So it's the ideal place to work.
Makes sense to
And
me.
here's an interesting thought. you can't even have emotions without a body
Or thoughts.
or thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think one thought that came to me while we were writing the blurb, and of course in general, is that when we think of ourselves, we tend to talk of our body as if it's separate from that self. But it is as much a part of what we perceive as self as anything else that we might point to. Whether it's thoughts, emotions, all of that happens in the body. As Mushtaq was saying, and as Todd was saying, those things can't even really happen without the body. So we kind of have to, if we haven't already, accept that home is in this body. Yes, Shuri.
I wanted to say that I use the body to help me make decisions. So when you're in a situation or you're going about your work, you're using your body to decide, go this way, go that way. So right now I'm in work clothes because I'm in the middle of pruning a Japanese buxus hedge, and it's in curves. So how do you know that the curve is at exactly the right angle? So as I'm moving around, my body is informing me, you've made the right amount of depth in that cut, the way that moves. And the same thing when you're in a situation where you even have no thought, your body will react before you've actually decided good, bad, afraid, happy, whatever. Your body's already made that reaction. And if you can actually feel and sense what is happening in your body, you're already informed about what's about to proceed, so that you make an informed assessment of what's going on, because the body's usually right. You know, you're using your gut feel. I used to be a trader. That gut feeling, you can sense that everybody is hitching themselves onto a certain emotional wave, and you think, wrong direction, I'm going the other way. You know, you can feel it. So I love that. You know, you can walk into a room and, you know, these people are not nice, or they're not telling you the truth. You can already feel that your body is this wonderful antenna that we can learn to trust more the more we listen to it. That's it.
Thanks, Shuri. Thanks, everybody. So you were saying, Mushtaq, that which is an important piece to this conversation, is that we can't even really have thoughts and emotions without the body itself.
Yeah. As Terry Pratchett pointed out when he was talking about somebody who had died and was sitting there, noticing that they didn't feel upset. Emotions are glandular in nature. No glands, no feelings. I don't know if that's true, never having been dead, but it strikes me as near-fetched. And that gets us to one of the problems with the body that Sufis, some Sufis think need to be addressed. We've talked at various other times about the concept of sensory motor amnesia. We forget how to be in our body. We forget how to move in certain ways. We forget how to activate parts of our body. Classic example, I'm going to pick on Sharia again, because she has this great little finger exercise that you can find by doing a search on YouTube for Shuri Sito and watch the finger exercise. When you can do that, you'll understand about how to begin to antidote sensory motor amnesia. Gurdjieff's so-called dances were an attempt to do this as well. He had people moving in ways that they weren't used to moving in non-habitual ways. And everybody tends to move habitually. And we need to begin breaking out of that so that we can move through the full range of what is possible for a human. And this is not just for our health or our flexibility, but this is for our sanity and our spiritual advancement.
Mm-hmm.
Why might that be? Why might it be for our spiritual advancement, whatever that is?
Well, we do have a comment in the chat that
Yeah.
could be relevant about that. Shall I read it?
Yes.
James says, it seems we often treat the body as a separate but connected object to be manipulated. Manipulated in ascetic denial to give us a big, quote, seeker ego, unquote, or manipulated in sensory excess, using pleasure to drown out discomfort and uncertainty. Which James adds, neither of which reintegrate the body back into awareness.
He is absolutely correct. Don't let it go to your head, James, but you're right.
Too late, I've already turned it into another ego.
Scoring those ego points. Yeah. Shuri offers, pain and decrepitude cost vitality.
It's true.
And Sumaya adds, it might be important because it helps us break our conditioning. This goes back to why it's important to seek what we would call being embodied.
Yes.
Yeah, so Nancy, did you have a thought you wanted to share as well?
Yeah, the body might be of spiritual importance because if what you're seeking is truth, then your sensations are a bunch of true things.
Yes.
Yep, thank you, Nancy. So we can see this operating, this, we've touched on perceptual honesty. We've touched on vital, personal vitality, physical vitality. We've touched on not fooling ourselves with either big trips into asceticism or in sensory excess. Obviously, there's a middle road that we are seeking to engage when we talk about embodiment, one that will allow us to be wholly well and spiritually, quote unquote, spiritually alive on many different levels. So engaging the body is never just about the body. Just as denying the body ends up never being just a denial of the body alone. So what do we mean when we say embodied, quote unquote, Mushtaq, in terms of talking about,
What it means is for your consciousness to be fully connected and integrated with all of you, including your body. For instance, until I mentioned this, were you aware of the big toe of your left foot? Show of hands, who was aware of the big toe of their left foot before I mentioned it? Yeah, that would be nobody.
Well, Todd has his hand up. Somehow I'm not so surprised at that.
largely because it hurts.
Oh, sorry to hear it, Todd.
Yeah, pain does that. So if you were fully integrated with your body, you might be aware of not just your left toe, but your left foot and your left ankle and your left calf and your left knee and your left thigh and your right foot. You might be aware and have a sensation of your whole body. Now, let's do an experiment. Everybody hold their hand up like this and do that. Back here. Everybody but Todd, what were you aware of? I say everybody but Todd because he's trained enough to actually not fall for this. If you're like most people, you were aware of this point where you started and this point where you ended, and then this point where you started and this point where you ended, and nothing in between. This was empty. So point A, point B, no line. If you study something like Tai Chi, part of what you are trying to learn, and this was also true of Gurdjieff's movements, is you want full awareness of every point between the starting point and the ending point. That's why those guys move so slow, is they want to take the time to feel this all the way across. But most of the time we don't do that. You think about opening the door, you have the starting state, and then you have the end state where your hand is on the doorknob. How did it get there? We don't know. It was unconscious. We want it in a certain sense to be unconscious because trying to move your arm consciously is a pain in the butt, but we want to be aware at the same time. Does that make sense?
We've got some nods, yes. Who is that? Well, Todd said in the chat, training the body trains the mind for good or ill in a direct and efficient way.
Yes.
So it's actually, as you were saying, though, you don't need to be micromanaging every single movement you make, because that can actually be more distracting than effective and cause you, as we talked about within the past couple of weeks, driving a car. You don't really want to be overthinking every turn of the wheel, every press of the gas pedal or brake pedal. That's not going to make you an effective driver. But through training, through sensing into movement and timing and all of those things, you can create movements that are trained with awareness, perhaps, and are able to just kind of seem to happen on their own. But you've been trained to do them well, and even having done that, you can have that watchful sense of observation happening at the same time that doesn't disrupt the activity. So it's kind of like a meta awareness, isn't it?
Osama has a question.
Yes.
Or an answer.
Well, that was right on point with what you just said, Noor, this meta awareness. Because what came to mind is this awareness of being in flow. while, let's say, creating art, playing sport, doing more art, playing an instrument, all of that, being in flow, it seems that there's this level of awareness, as you called it, meta awareness, that is observing everything that's happening. However, it's also allowing the body to do its thing. So when I'm playing an instrument, after I learn the rules of the instrument, and my body has this muscle memory that's involved with everything that I want to achieve with the instrument, then I can go ahead and step into this flow state or meta awareness, as you said, Noor, and let the body do its thing. Now, the question is what your, or how is this state similar to embodiment, and how is it different? What's the parallel between those two states of being in flow and being in that embodiment state?
It's a good question. What do you think, Mushtaq?
Being in flow is being embodied. Now, I know flow, well, I know it from some things that are not totally physical, but I mostly know it through physical things. One of the reasons I love to fence is because it's fairly easy for me to get into flow when I'm fencing. And when I find myself in a state of flow and I'm fencing, I am completely in my body. I'm not trying to do anything with it, and yet the awareness becomes encompassing. And does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it seems like whatever instrument is used, if there's any instrument, the awareness encompasses even that. Everything's kind of become an extension of that awareness. Now, the question is, can that state be in the day-to-day?
Yes, it absolutely can be in the day-to-day, and it should be in the day-to-day. Flow state is a birthright that every human being has, and it has been stolen from us. And it is essential that we recover it.
So we've done some talks, at least one, I believe, specifically on flow, right? I think I'm remembering. So if people want to,
Yeah, I'll see if I can find them and put them at the end of this.
yeah, I think that would be a good
And
idea.
before we get on to James, Yusuf made a very important observation.
Yes.
Said, by the way, the Turkish word for body is vücud. It is the word that Yunus Emre, the word in Yunus Emre's poetry, and it basically is being. Yeah, we know that word from the Arabic too, which is wujud, as in the thing that Ibn Arabi talks about.
Oneness of being.
Wahdat al-wujud.
Yep.
And it means being. So in Turkish, they understand that being and body are one. Do you happen to have that poem handy, Yusuf? Aha!
He does.
Can we take a break and ask you to actually read it in the original language? Because I think it's much better.
Of course.
Thank you, thank you.
Mana bahrine daldık. vücut sırrını bulduk. İki cihan sert eser cümle vücutta bulduk. Bu çizginen gökleri, taht-ı sera yerleri, 70.000 hicapları cümle vücutta bulduk. 7 gök, 7 yeri, dağları, denizleri, uçmak ile tamuyu cümle vücutta bulduk. Gece ile gündüzü, gökte 7 yıldızı, levhte yazılan sözü cümle vücutta bulduk. Musa'nın ağdığı turu, yoksa Beytül Mahmur'u, İsrafil'in çaldığı suru cümle vücutta bulduk. Tevrat ile İncil'i, Zebur ile Furkan'ı, bunlardaki beyanı cümle vücutta bulduk. 1 ile 2 3'ü, 4 ile 5'ü 6, 7 8 9'u cümle vücutta bulduk. Yunus'un sözleri hak, cümle dediği saddak, ne gördüysen kamu hak, cümle vücutta bulduk.
Thank you.
And what was missing in the translation is this 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 5 and 6, 7 and 8 and 9, we find all in the body.
Yes.
So
Interesting.
there's something about 9 here also.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, somebody will make an Enneagram out of that. Yeah.
That was great, though. Thank you.
Sheikh Tanner had a lot to say about this poem, and he was of the opinion that you couldn't really translate it into English. You could only approximate it. And it sounds better in the Turkish. Yeah. What Rumi was to the Persian language, Yunus was to the Turkish language. And unfortunately, he doesn't get as much press, which is too bad. But we digress. Such a nice
lovely digression, though. Yes.
Yes.
I'm glad we had that. Thank you. I know James had a thought and Shuri had a thought. Shuri, you were unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to share? And then James.
I did, but it's okay. You can continue. James, go ahead.
Thanks, Shuri. Sorry about that.
Mine might be a bit redundant. It was just back to Osama. Osama, I was wondering if you were sort of distinguishing between deliberate training states, deliberate awareness exercises, and the spontaneous, I'll say spontaneous result of that when one is in flow. That was just going back to your question that you asked before, because that's kind of how I tend to break things up, is there's deliberate exercises I'll undertake with a conscious intention behind them. And there's moments of flow which they're not unconscious, but they're not conventional effort or conventional attention. I don't know if that's a valid distinction or not. It's kind of how I think about it, sort of. That's all.
Interesting. I was mainly coming from just an observation of just really making music. You know, just observing when I get in that state of flow. And because I'm trying to, just for myself, I'm trying to find a reference point to make sure that I understand what is being said here about embodiment. So I'm trying to find a reference point within myself to see, just so that I can be like, ooh, I know what that is, and then go from open that door or go through that door. So I wanted to understand, is flow similar to what Mushtaq and Noor were talking about as far as embodiment? But yeah, I was just coming from an observation when making music. But that is interesting as far as like the exercises as you're talking about. But I haven't experienced that just yet.
Okay. I don't have anything more to say on that.
So, Cherie, do you still have something you would like to add?
Well, I was thinking about in relation to movement, and when you're practicing something like scales in music, which I used to do when I was a child, and it wasn't until those scales were automatic that you started to understand what that purpose was. And so you could do that with music in the way that you're practicing, but you're trying to stop yourself from going on automatic. So my movement example is a person came into my space and he thought he was very special. And I said, can you do a front split? He goes, yes. And he just dropped, bang, straight down into a front split. And if you understand, it means a leg in the front and a leg out the back, straight down to the floor. And your hips, the ideal thing is square hips. But his hips were in big rotation for the front leg going forward and back. And I said, okay, I said, in stretch therapy, we slow everything down like Tai Chi so that you feel every iteration of your movement. You know what is engaging, you know what is disengaging, you know how you're cheating, you know how to make it more intense. So I said, can you do that at glacial speed? And he couldn't. And so that was revealing to him that he didn't embody a front split, even though he thought he embodied a front split. So I guess that's part of what we're doing here is, are we embodied or do we think we are? Do we over trick ourselves? So sometimes the mind is too much in control, and when we're coming back into our body and slowing everything down, and then you can pull up and you practice the part that you're not so good at, and then you extend it a little bit more and a little bit more. So I hope that helps, because I think some people can fool themselves into thinking they've embodied something when they haven't. If you can really slow it down and you can reproduce it with grace and ease, that might be something entirely different. And I think musicians I've read who practice a piece really slowly and then super fast and then back to normal speed have a different experience of playing that piece and are often better at it because they can do really slow, really fast, and then what is required. So that's the same with anything that you're using this practice for, or this awareness for, building this embodiment awareness where neither the mind nor the body is superseding the other.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shri. Yeah, I just want to, the way that this topic, broadly speaking, came to me was I don't drink coffee, and I decided to have a mochaccino with like not much in my stomach, and I could feel my whole body just like rev up, like just full of tension and not being able to slow my nervous system down. But what I did was I decided I'm going to fold clothes mindfully. And I decided to slow everything down and not get perfectionistic about it, but just take that meta awareness and watch my body in action as I'm folding the clothes. Not too slow, not too fast, and like, where is the tension building up? How am I holding my breath in places? How am I tensing my back or my hip muscles or all of those things? And just trying to, as the tension would arise, let it go to the best of my ability, which was tough because, like I said, I was all just like high on that caffeine and just feeling overwhelmed by it, truly. So that was how I figured out to, I don't want to say self-soothe because it wasn't just like that serious, but it was a moment where I thought, how can I cultivate stillness in movement? That was how I thought about it. And that is how I would say, embodiment manifested for me under just the most mundane of circumstances.
A really good exercise, if anybody wants to try it, is standing on one leg with your eyes closed. If you want to start with 30 seconds eyes open, notice how still you are. And then close your eyes for 30 seconds and notice how you're flogging all over the place. Quite funny. And it really is the most revealing thing about how visually hooked you are in the world, but how you can trick yourself into thinking you're still and you're not.
Yeah.
Why can't I be still? I've only got my eyes closed. Why can't I be still? I can do it with my eyes open. But if you want a stillness practice and find where you can really still yourself in a physical practice, try that.
Yeah. Funny you should mention that, because I have a practice for everybody.
Yeah.
If we were in person, I would be getting you all up and moving and feeling what it feels like. But we can't really do that in a Zoom class like this. I'm not set up like Cherie is when she's teaching, where I actually have a whole studio around me. I have a fake desert.
A fake forest.
Fake forest, yes. But there is an exercise, a practice. It's called al-lulua, which in Arabic means the pearl, more or less. Correct me if I'm wrong, Osama.
There you go.
Good. And
Close enough.
it works like this. You hold up your right hand and you imagine a small pearl sitting in the palm of your right hand. And it's not just any pearl. It is a pearl that is so wonderful that it gives off a little glow of its own light. For me, it's almost bluish, and it's also warm. So when I visualize, when I can see and feel that pearl sitting in the palm of my hand, and that might take a minute, I then let it sink into the skin of my palm so the pearl is in my hand. Not on my hand, but in my hand. And as it's sitting there in my hand, I allow myself to feel the warmth that radiates from the pearl. And if I'm really clever, I can see the light radiating from the pearl through my skin. Then I allow the pearl to move from the palm of my hand up and over and down into my wrist. And I feel it move the whole way. And the light of the pearl illuminates the entire inside of my arm as it moves. So imagine almost like a flashlight, only round, a globular light that is moving through the body. And it slowly moves down my arm towards my elbow. And as it goes, I let my arm glow with the light of the pearl, and I feel the warmth, and I see the pearl moving. And I move it all the way down to my elbow. I check and make sure that I'm not falling into a trance while I'm doing this, because that's easy to do, and that's not the exercise. Stay present with it. And as it comes to the elbow, I let it sit in the elbow joint and warm the elbow joint with its light. And then if we were to continue this, it would go up my arm, across my body, and down my left arm to be in my left palm. That's the first step of it. Eventually, that pearl is going to travel all through your body, and it's going to be powered by your breath. When you can do this simple visualization of bringing the pearl down your right arm, up to the right shoulder, across the scapula, down your left arm, and into your left palm, call me, and I'll teach you the rest of it.
So
I
you
do
just,
with my eyes closed at first because it's easier to cut out the distractions and see it with my mind's eye. But after a while, you can do it with your eyes open. So try it both ways. The trick is to not go into trance when you do this. So you have to constantly remind yourself to be present, to be awake to this, to not let yourself drift off, because there will be a tendency to want to do that. And it will have certain benefits, one of which is that your arms will feel different after you've done. They will be more pleasant. Yes, Cherie.
you said scapula, but you went across here. So do you mean actually clavicles, or do you want it to go across the back and
I
down?
want it to go in between the clavicle and the scapula, through the
So
center of the
through
body. Yeah.
Internal.
the body internally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
This is not on the surface of the body. So yeah, I should have been more clear on that. Thanks for the catch on that one.
I seem to have a real problem trying to do these kinds of exercises because, and this has happened before, because I can't get to the point where I can visualize the pearl at all. So it's like I can't even get to point zero.
Okay, then you might need something else. You might be somebody who absolutely can't visualize anything.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
So what color was your childhood bedroom, the wall?
Well, there were multiple of them, but probably the earliest one I remember was kind of a light white yellow of sorts, more white than yellow, perhaps.
Oh, you saw that?
Yeah, but that's like big thing. This was trying to
You notice how you're
visualize.
making excuses now?
No, I'm just trying to understand that there's a difference
There
between.
is no difference. If you can see the room that you grew up in, even unclearly, that means that you have a power of visualization. Now,
Oh, okay, I see what you mean.
the
Yeah.
question is it worth it for you to cultivate that? Because it takes work. And a lot of people are not willing to do the work. If you're not willing to do the work, there are other exercises you can do that involve moving your body. So it's not like you have to go this path. There are multiple paths up this mountain.
Yeah, I think in general I'm not very visual in my imagination. It's
Yeah,
like
probably.
I'm much more musically oriented. I can make up tunes easily.
Okay.
I can't make up
Can
pictures.
you imagine what a pearl would sound like?
You mean if it was hit?
However you can hear it. If I were to do that, I would sit here, and I have good powers of visualization, and I taught myself to have this. Naturally, I am an auditory lead. I hear things really well. So I can take this pearl sitting in my hand and give it a sound, and that sound will be the vibration that I associate with that color, which is about an A880. If you want to look it up on the piano, find the middle C scale.
Oh, I know where it is on the piano.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, that's the note.
I mean, that's a high A.
Yeah, it's a high A.
Yeah.
And I hear that sound and I feel the vibration in my hand. And then I can make it go down in the same way. And the vibration creates warmth because the vibration is energy. Energy gives off heat. So you can do it that way. Try it that way. We may have just invented an entire new practice.
You know, that's a game changer for me because I'm on the same, I'm very similar to you, Ian, in that regard, right? And I expressed this to Mustafa Noor before, as far as being able to see something. I have a challenge with that. when you asked Mustaq, when you asked the color of the room, for me, the first thing that I thought of was, as a kid, I had this orange balloon with me all the time as a little kid. I
Okay.
loved orange balloons. So my mind went there. However, but I don't know if I remember it just from remembering it or remembering seeing a photo of myself holding it. So sometimes there's
Yeah.
that. But anyway,
I see no reason why you could not do this with sound.
that's a
It,
game changer.
it could be any sound that is easy for you to grab hold of, right?
Yeah.
So just like a
And you're going to want
whirring.
to tune it to what is appropriate to you. What is the sound that a pearl would make if you vibrated a pearl?
Yeah, I have no idea.
That would be something to find out. You'll know it because it'll feel right.
Yeah. So Todd has been trying to chime in for some time.
Chime in.
Yeah.
It's two things. Can feel be a good way to start with if visualization?
Yeah, you could do it with feeling too. You can do it with any of the sensory representational systems. The way I first learned it was to imagine the image first and then the feeling.
Mhm.
But you can imagine the feeling first and then maybe find the image. Or, and this makes me happy too, find the sound. I mean, I can sit there and imagine that pearl just humming away with that nice high A.
I'm thinking of
I
a
fa-
friend who actually has no ability to visualize. He has to
Yeah.
he has to sub vocalize when he reads,
Yeah,
and has
maybe
no and
it
has
would be
no
an
memory.
area for you to experiment with and then come back and tell us how it worked.
I'll try. I'll ask him how it works for him. What works
Yeah,
for him.
That would be great. That would add to our toolkit in terms of being able
yeah,
to connect
because
with people.
yeah, the secret to this is it's designed to get your attention into your body and to get you to perceive a channel. And like I said, this is going to follow all through the body. It's going to follow what the Indian medicine calls the nadis. Nadi is a Sanskrit word that means tube. And they postulate, much like acupuncture meridians, that the body is full of these and you move it around. India has a yogic practice that is similar to this. As a matter of fact, we may have stole it from the Indians, for all I know. But this works. And it gets you inside your own body and being aware of it. It will not completely antidote sensory motor amnesia, but you'll find some places where you might have some. You'd be moving along and all of a sudden you find a blank space. You can't put the pearl there and you have to get it to the other side of the blank space and then you can move it again. That's a weird sensation.
But another thing of this is to actually do it in the sense of giving yourself time to work through this exercise as opposed to kind of doing what Sheree was talking about, where you do a split, where you're just like, bam, death drop.
Yeah.
Take your time. Yeah.
I was almost going to talk about this a little bit before when we were back on the music thing, but I came across a couple of interesting videos recently. One was Tal Wilkenfeld, who's an amazing female bass player, in an interview with Lex Friedman. And let me go check the title. It was
Yeah, put up the link to it if you have it.
How to Practice Guitar. Play very slowly.
Yeah.
And I'll put up the link. But the other one was interview with Pat Metheny on improvisation and theory, which also was very interesting because improvisation is definitely a very different skill than being able to play from music. For example, I learned piano and I got reasonably good for a teenager. But it was all classical piano and I'm playing from music. And I could barely improvise to save my life, even though a couple of people did try to get me started on that. But with guitar, I made a deliberate decision to do it the opposite way round. So I can improvise on guitar, but I can't read music on guitar. So it was very interesting. But one of the things with the Pat Metheny talked about was the way I interpreted it was that you end up integrating all of the centers because your intellect has to be there at one level, your feeling and emotion has to be there at another level, but you also have to be able to just do it with moving center, just able to just do it. And I found that to be very interesting and actually quite enlightening in its own right. I'll see if I can find that as well. Probably shouldn't be hard.
That resonates for me vocally as well. You know, I can imitate through listening and I can improvise. Improvisation requires using many skills at once, where you are even like spontaneously to music I've never heard before, because I have to listen very carefully and I have to feel it as I listen to it as well. And I have to apply technical skill in that I know what a harmony feels like. I know what dissonance feels like. So it's happening in real time in a very physically embodied sort of way.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way. I can improvise on a whole lot of things, but it does depend on the genre. I find if you're not familiar with a genre, you're not going to be able to improvise in
Oh
it.
yeah, there's that too. Yeah, and just technical proficiency that
Yeah.
matters too. Yeah. Yep. Lots of layers of leaning into being, I would say, happen when you're working in a spontaneous way.
Yeah. Ibrahim had a thought or question or comment or answer.
Yes. Yeah.
A thought, question, and a comment in one. For me, it's actually a lot of thoughts. And it's interesting because at the start of this conversation, there was talk about martial arts. And in the call last week, we kind of went down a path similarly etching towards like somatic work and what that essentially looks like. And this common thread that I'm noticing thus far is there's so many ways to just wake up. But in the process of waking up, what I'm kind of hearing and just through my own experiences in life, it's that oscillation in the moment where that widening happens and you're able to catch yourself. And at moments there's like this space of silence into it. But as I was hearing Osama first talk about music and something that I wrote down, even in a musical composition, silence plays a part in the beauty. And through recognizing that and acknowledging that, so much happens throughout the entire principal thing of being produced and happening. That's the first thing. And the second thing was this whole concept of improv and improvisation. I'm saying
Improvisation.
Yeah, there you go.
improvisation. From my experience in different disciplines that I've had the opportunity to play with, prior to even experiencing that, there was always this state of isolating And in that state of isolating, it's slowing down, kind of similar to that exercise of just practicing joint by joint, piece by piece, part by part. And then eventually there's this integrative aspect that happens. And then once that integrative aspect is almost synthesized in this interesting way, then improv can actually flow a little bit easier through those stages. For me, and this is the question that I'm still pondering, many times in a practice, I'll practice, but then sometimes I can find myself hanging on to what worked in the past to try to keep using it. And then that bleeds into stagnation, which puts me back to a different state. So that oscillation is such a beautiful thing in our process. And it brought me to write down something. It's the pause between the movements that lies the potential for self-awareness and change. And in that ebb and flow, such a beautiful thing comes out. So
it's
the
funny
question,
you should mention that, because one of the basic practices is called the void practice. And we haven't talked about that in a while. It starts with paying attention to the spaces between things.
Yeah.
We focus on the objects, but there is the spaces between the objects. The first time I learned this was actually in art class, when my art teacher said, draw the spaces around this vase and these flowers. And it was like, wow, shift in perspective. And then I learned this practice, which starts with seeing, and the highest level of it is being able to hear the silence between the sounds.
I was thinking of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is tying things that we've talked about.
Yeah, we're probably going to have to
Over the
refresh
months.
everybody's memory.
Yeah.
Void practice. Make a note, Noor.
I will definitely bring that up again. And
Arturo Rubinstein said it beautifully. He said the notes most people can play as well as I. He says, but the space between the notes is where the master lies.
Yeah. And Lao Tzu said it very well as well. The usefulness of a wheel is in the hub, the empty space.
Mm-hmm.
The usefulness of a cup is in the empty space.
Yeah.
And this goes into that same concept. When you can begin to perceive the spaces between things and hear the spaces between things and feel the spaces between things, life gets very, very interesting.
Yep. And the key word I gave Mushtaq for our seed for this topic was stillness. So even in movement, we're finding that stillness.
Yeah.
The
and
space
that will
between
go back
things.
to
Yeah.
the very first thing we ever put up on this channel, which I challenge you all to see if you can find the answer to, which is the dance of the new moon. Very first video. Most people spend months trying to find the answer to that. A lot of people never get it. There was one guy who got it within minutes. I was very impressed, but he had an odd background. And that was Sean.
Sean, yeah.
Yeah.
We're all odd ducks around here.
We are all odd ducks around here.
But Ibrahim, you connected a whole lot of dots.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that was extremely useful as a thought and a question and an answer. There was an answer in there. Who have we not heard from?
We've got Brian, Sumaya, Alka. Yeah. Alka, what's on your mind?
Okay.
There you are.
There's well, when I was listening to the poetry, first of all, I wanted to just thank Yusuf, the way you recited that poetry. Whew, It was phenomenal.
Wow.
Wow. So, I did say wow. Very funny. This apparently has, you like the way I say wow, I
It's
guess.
close to my
Wow.
heart. Yeah, my friends used
Yeah,
to say it at Sufi like jam sessions and stuff. We were
yeah.
doing poetry
Wow.
together.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for me, when I was listening to the poetry in the beginning, I remembered the way I was seeing body being embodied is that Hashtardam. I'm not
Yes.
sure if I'm saying that right.
Close
The
enough.
Hashtardam, where we were discussing about the field phenomena, that how we are the field phenomena, where the one pull is physical and the other pull is the spirit. The body being the positive and lungs being the negative and soul being the third force. So I was kind of thinking that body being embodied and in is the only way out through this. So the drought was when you don't understand this. And the sea is when you understand and experience all this, if you are an adult human being and if you're lucky. So for me, in is the only way out, is what I was feeling.
Thank you for sharing, Alka. Yep. I know that that has been a resonant theme and things for you. Yeah. And that's a good thing.
I got that lottery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got that lottery.
Sumaya, what's on your mind?
Would practicing the pause between breaths be a good way to try to kind of, be in that embodied state throughout the day at least?
It couldn't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely couldn't hurt. I have not used it for exactly that, but please try it and tell us how it's working for you, because you may be onto something here.
I think when I find myself in a state where it's hard to slow down enough to be present in the body, it's breath practices like that one that create the openness needed to turn attention more intentionally to the body and to my movement and all of that.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. Especially like if you've ever taken like therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, they talk a lot about breath and about it bringing awareness to your emotions and stuff. And so I think that I've been trying to do that recently, so I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Good. Let's do.
It's definitely a way to bring yourself into the present moment. And when you do that, you can allow yourself to feel your body.
Yeah.
So I can't see why it wouldn't work. That's two new great ideas that we've gotten from you people. I'm impressed.
Brian, how about you? What have you been thinking about?
When we talked about flow states earlier and how that relates to the runner's high, and if it's the same thing, and the runner's high usually tends to kick in with longer distance running, and I was just curious if you had any techniques on to tap into that sooner into the run instead of having to wait to let
Yeah.
it kick in later.
There's one thing that I do that works really well, which is I only breathe through my nose. And that means that sometimes, especially if I'm running a distance, and back in the day, I used to run ultras, so I like distance. I don't do that anymore because I don't have any reason to. But when I was younger, I was like, my ancestors could run 100 miles. I better do it. But if you breathe only through your nose, it forces you to slow down. And when you slow down, you pay more attention. And when you pay attention, you can drop into, I don't think of it as a runner's high. I mean, it can feel high, but I think of it as flow state. You hit that zone and you're in the flow state and you can hold it for quite some time. And as long as you are in that state, running is a pleasure.
And could focusing on either the rhythm of the breath or the steps also
I like focusing on the rhythm of the breath and the steps. I like to breathe in rhythm with my steps. And I do this with walking as well. You don't have to be running to find a flow state in movement like that.
Yeah, I just did that walking to Tai Chi class Saturday morning.
Yeah. And back when I was living back east, I did it while I was cross-country skiing. It's really easy to do it then. Yeah, yeah, you find a nice open stretch that is neither too easy nor too hard, and you just cruise down it. Especially, I used to go and ski in blizzards. That was like one of my favorite things because there was nobody else out there, and I had backcountry skis, so skiing in new snow was not a problem.
He's a determined one, this guy, especially in his younger
Well, actually,
years.
I'm just a misanthrope. So anytime that I can ski and there's nobody around me, that's heaven.
Yeah.
good stuff. Thanks.
Any other questions or thoughts? I think everyone has had at least one opportunity to speak, so I'm not going to put anyone else on the spot, but you're all welcome to chime in.
There is one other thing that I've been thinking a lot about him lately. One of the world's no shit effective magicians. He was a private first class from a Mississippi sharecropping family named Willie Duckworth. He was in a unit, an army unit that was doing one of these interminable marches through the swamp, and the men were turning. They were getting cranky. They were out of step. They were getting argumentative. They were getting tired. And so he started off with a call and response work song and kept riffing off it. By the time they got back to the base, they were all at a fast march in step, all working together as a unit and all breathing. Most important, breathing. Fortunately, the sergeant was wise enough to drag him to the commandant's offices, which is something a PFC does not want to happen. And the commandant was wise enough to send him off to the Department of the Army. And that's how the US military got marching cadences, because it turned, by this amazing alchemy, it turned unhappy individual people into a unit of soldiers.
Yeah,
whether that's a good
what
magic,
we now call group flow.
Yeah, and it's magic. It's wonderful magic when it's done for a good cause.
That's a good way to put it, Todd.
Yeah.
Yep.
That reminds me of Sama.
Yes.
And dhikr within Sama. And that kind of space, because it definitely, I think that fits
It does.
what we were speaking about here.
And it all starts with the breath.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, for those who don't know, that's the classic image of the whirling dervish. They're practicing sima.
Yeah. Sema actually means to listen. So there's one for you, Anne.
Nancy.
Yeah, I've run into some physical difficulties lately, nothing devastating, but not great. And I think we've mostly been talking about applying these ideas to when things are going well and you want to improve an ability. But what about, when things are difficult?
Yeah. So I can speak to that a little bit. I have pain flares on a fairly regular basis, like today. I'm having a lot of pain in my knees for some reason. And I do not stop practice just because I'm in pain. It just takes different forms.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is I can make peace with my pain by being with that pain, by being embodied while experiencing that pain, which for me is like, what can I do, if anything, instead of ignoring it, that will relieve it? How can I give it comfort? And also, how can I, at the same time as I take action, be in acceptance of it, because it ebbs and flows.
Mhm.
And that's not something that's a mental experience. It is very much a physical one. So there are always opportunities for applying these teachings in ways that don't necessarily require having, none of us have perfect bodies. None of us have bodies that cooperate all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah. Does that help at all, Nancy?
It does, yeah. No, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got an observation on that. Getting on for I think it was 3 years ago, I had my first bout ever of what turned out to be heartburn, although I didn't know it at the time. I called it throat burn because it was just I woke up in the middle of the night and it's like I got this pain, and it was a
Yeah.
horrible pain. And the only way I got through it, I couldn't lie down, but if I sat up and slow breathing, this lasted for about an hour. Slow breathing was the only thing that let me get through that. Um, Fortunately, it got somewhat less bad, and after internet searching, it didn't happen all that often, even in the beginning, but after doing some internet searching, I discovered that it was actually a heartburn. And then I discovered some pills that are good for taking care of infrequent heartburns. And those kind of took the place of the agony and the time. Unfortunately, I haven't had an episode for quite a few months now. At this point, I sort of think I'm probably over it. I have no idea why it came on, no idea why it stopped. But that slow breathing just worked. But I mean, it didn't stop the pain, but it let me survive it. It's an experience I would not wish on anyone.
Yeah, just as an aside, I have found the few times that that's happened to me that a level teaspoon of baking soda in a glass of water and drank slowly cures it every time.
Hmm.
Because it's an acid thing, right? Acid reflux is what it sounds like. And baking soda is a base. You mix them together, they neutralize each other. You belch a lot, but who cares?
Whatever works and mitigates harm, right? Yeah, so I think this is important to note that being embodied does not require a perfect body. It damn well does not.
Which is good because none of us have one of those.
Yeah.
Yours is pretty perfect, but that's a different story.
So keep that in mind, and don't let a bad day get you down. It's just grist for the mill.
Yeah. And just as an aside, the next time we do an in-person retreat, we're probably going to focus a lot on movement. And not in a super athletic way, but in a way that anybody can do. There are things you can do even if you can't stand. You can do them sitting.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome. And James has offered us anyone who's dealing with pain and is trying to figure out how to work with it while doing a lot of the work that we do. And this has come up in my pain management group as well, is this acceptance and commitment therapy, which is something that people can do on a self-help level to build a more neutral and even positive relationship with your body and with your experience of pain. So the book suggested is Living Beyond Your Pain. So that might be useful to some folks.
And that's a link to one of the online library things, so you can read it for free. So
yeah, that's on archive.org if you want to search for it, everybody. All right, so that's all I got.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I'm actually quite hungry, speaking of like being embodied and listening to what my body is telling me.
Time for the food.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to switch over to Brady Bunch mode. There we go.
But it's been great to hang out with you all. And, we've talked about this Pearl exercise. You can use the visual, faculties. You can use auditory faculties or sensational faculties to do that exercise. Try it all out. See what seems to work best for you. And then perhaps add another layer of sensory engagement with that practice. And try out breath as a way of kind of opening a doorway into embodied sensation. See what that's like for you. And definitely get back to us on your experiences. Thanks, everybody. It's so good to spend time with all of you and to have all of your awesome different life experiences come to enrich our time together here.
Yeah, if it was just us front loading information into you, this would get boring really fast.
Yeah. Yep. All right, everybody. Let's wave to each other and everybody watching on the replay.
Take care, folks.
We'll hang out with you again soon. Take care. Bye.